Good morning and welcome to our house. This is Peter Hunt, and the show is brought to you by the continuously improving HuntRealEstate.com, where everything is truly easier for your real estate and home ownership experience. HuntRealEstate.com is powered by Hunt Real Estate ERA here in Buffalo, Niagara, and all across upstate New York, and also through our links to Boston, Massachusetts. The show is also brought to you by Hunt Mortgage, NMLS number 37405. Hunt Mortgage is a proud equal opportunity lender. Call them today, 716-633-3700, or visit huntmortgage.com to find out about how we operate and seek out one of our very skilled mortgage consultants to work with you to find the lowest rate and closing costs for your particular home financing needs and wants, which is always our guarantee. Also ask about or research online our many exclusive programs, including our unique pre-purchase commitment that allows you at no cost or risk to effectively enter the market to find your next home with cash. In today's very competitive residential real estate market, which we're going to be talking about today, there is still a shortage of listings. When you do find the house you want to make sure that your offer is as strong as possible when there are still often more than one offer. From a seller's perspective, cash is very persuasive, as you can imagine. But if you're working with a skilled Hunt sales professional armed with your pre-purchase commitment, your offer is the equivalent of cash, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And you may now find yourself in a home that was right for you when you bought it years ago, but you've outgrown it, or maybe it's outgrown you. In any case, it no longer meets your lifestyle. But where will you go, even if you were to sell at a great price? Hunt Mortgage and your Hunt sales professional can help. To learn more about any of our unique programs, go to huntmortgage.com or call Hunt Mortgage today at 716-633-3700 for a personalized, customized service in a truly consultative environment. Hunt is the official real estate and relocation provider of our hometown professional teams, the Buffalo Bills and the Buffalo Sabres, and we're always very proud of our Bandits and Bisons as well. Our house is broadcast at this time weekly on WBEN 930 AM and 98.5 FM HD3. You can listen live anywhere in the world through the Odyssey app or at WBEN.com, and recorded episodes of the Our House Radio Show are now available on our blog at HuntRealEstate.com and also as a podcast through the iTunes Store for you to share, stream, or download. Subscribe to the Our House Radio Show and never miss another episode. And Realizing Real Estate, our new podcast, also is available at the iTunes Store. All of these productions are designed to help you protect and enhance your investment in real estate, which is the mission of all of our programming. For those of you who'd like to comment or ask a question about any aspect of real estate or what my guest may address today, please email me at peter.hunt@huntrealestate.com or leave a message on our website, huntrealestate.com. And comments and questions can also be texted to the station at 716-803-0930. We have a very special show for you today. I have two guests in the studio with me today. Our first guest is Inas Latif, one of the leading professionals in our industry. And also here is an attorney who specializes in real estate, Eric Vallone. Welcome, Inas, and welcome, Eric.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks, Peter.
It's good to have you here. Over the last several weeks, we've been doing a lot of insights through our guests in various aspects of the real estate world, everything from development, what may or may not be happening, all the way up to governmental influences through our elected officials. We've got, in Buffalo, we've got a mayor primary coming up soon, and there's going to be a lot of potential for some changes in our economy locally. We hope. The governor has announced a new budget, as I think you know, and in that process, there's funding for things like some type of affordable housing, which we're very happy to see. But to begin with, Inas, why don't you give us a little quick update on what you're seeing in the market today?
Well, if you're a seller in today's market, you're in luck because we have a shortage of inventory and very high buyer demand. As you know, we're running out of land, so a new construction is very limited in our area, and existing home prices continue to rise. So again, if you're a seller in this market, it's definitely a very good time for you to meet with a professional, learn about your options, learn about what you could net from the sale of your home, and understand that there is high demand for housing right now in the market. Now, if you're a buyer in the market, that might be a little bit more challenging. However, with the right guidance and advice, we can help navigate a buyer to be able to secure a home in this market as well.
You know, this is very interesting, as our listeners know, and certainly Eric and you, Inas, know, our industry has been under a lot of scrutiny in terms of the value of the services we provide. And you just described something, Inas, which I think some people may not sense. For example, if I'm a buyer in today's market, I may have to make offers on 5, 6, 8, 10 houses before I get the house that I want.
It could be.
And what amazing thing is that when I'm from a seller's perspective, and I may or may not be paying a full commission, but there's two portions to a commission, the list side and the buy side, and buyer agency. We don't want to get into that today. But the fact of the matter is, in that environment, sometimes from a seller's perspective, it might look pretty easy to sell a house, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they may say, well, gee, why am I going to pay you as much as I'm going to pay you, Enos? From a buyer's perspective, it says, well, you're beating your brains in. We still can get a house. So how do you rationalize the value side of that when you're talking to buyers and sellers?
I think it's important for the consumer to really understand what goes behind the scenes. When you are selling a home, maybe because there's high demand, it might seem that it's very easy to sell your home. But are you selling your home for the fullest value, for the most net? Is it being presented to a large pool of buyers? Is it being presented well? Do you have the right representation when it comes to negotiation? Just because we have multiple offers, sometimes it doesn't mean that there's not negotiations that take place. So you do need someone who's very skilled in that matter. And also managing the process all the way to close. Sometimes it's easy to sell something, but to get it to close, successfully close, could be very challenging as well. And I'm sure Eric could elaborate a little bit more on that and some of the things that could come up during the process.
Speaking of that, Eric, as you in your experience, and you've had a lot of experience closing loans and closing the sale process for buyers and sellers, what are the minefields out there today? I mean, I just had a conversation with in the last day a couple of our sellers and potential sellers, and they don't know much about it because they might only experience it once every 10, 12, 15 years, however long. Some people have been in their home for 30 years, and so all of a sudden it's all news.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that happen because the market is so crazy and there's so much demand. And multiple offers. Real estate agents tend to get creative with terms that they put in contracts, and a lot of times we see things where something so, for example, buyer's agents are saying, hey, if the appraisal falls short, the buyer will make up the difference. They'll still buy the house. And
let me stop you there.
Sure.
When you say appraisal falls short, let's say, as you described, Enos, we have a bunch of offers on one house,
Mm-hmm.
and the highest offer wins, whatever that may be. And in that, it's not just the price; it's the terms. And as Eric's pointing out, they might say, well, we're going $50,000 over the list price. Just pick a number. That may not
Very
be
common.
Very common. Okay, it's $50,000 over the list price, and you, as say representing the seller, you might say, well, gee, do you say we might be walking into a minefield here because the appraisal of that property is going to be based on recent sales,
Mm-hmm.
and if the recent sale was at the list price, a recent sale, and now we've got a brand new price, $50,000 higher. What do you caution them at all, or what do you say to them?
Yeah, it's a very tricky situation. I definitely caution my sellers if I'm on the listing side of things. And it all depends also on what other offers we have. So this is where I say you really need the expert to help you navigate through even multiple offer situation and choosing the best offer. But it all depends on how many offers we received, what the other offers look like, price and terms. And in some cases, to Eric's point, we're able to potentially negotiate an appraisal guarantee from the buyer.
Okay.
What does that mean?
Define that, please.
Define that. Appraisal guarantee is when a buyer agrees to make up the difference between the appraisal value and the sale price of the home. So let's take a $200,000 home sold for $250,000, however, only appraised at $220,000. If it had an appraisal guarantee by the buyer for a full amount, then the buyer would have potentially agreed ahead of time to pay that difference, and they will.
That'd be $30,000 additional cash.
Correct. Some buyers have a limitation to that amount, so they might give us an appraisal guarantee, but not necessarily unlimited. And they might limit it to $10,000. And if we're $30,000 short, now the seller has to adjust down by $20,000. It's important that the sellers, when they accept an offer, they completely understand all the terms and all potential issues that may come up with an appraisal. And it depends also on whether or not we have comps to help support a higher sale price that we believe an appraisal could use, or we could use with an appraiser to argue the appraisal value should it come in short. So there's so much involved, and every situation could be a little bit different. And you need someone who fully understands it, knows all the nuances, ins and outs of it, and is ready to fight for you as a seller to protect your best interest and make sure that you're receiving that high price that was offered on the home at the end of the day. However, if it's not possible, if we were not able to negotiate a appraisal guarantee from the buyer, or we do anticipate that the comps may come in lower, as long as the seller is prepared ahead of time when they accepted the offer, that potentially this offer could end up with less money by the time we close. I think transparency in that situation and preparing the seller properly is very important too. And we have those situations as well.
I cut you off in the middle of your response, Eric Vallone, a little earlier. You just got into the appraisal gap issue. There's a bunch of other issues that show up on contracts. What kind of terms could cause a curveball in your, say, relationship to the other attorney, for example, or even with the buyer or seller?
Sure. Yeah, I think the biggest things are just things that aren't entirely clear on their face, or maybe the agents talked about it and just didn't express it entirely clearly. Sometimes there's clauses with personal property, what's going to stay, what's going to go, that can cause issues. We had an argument recently about television mount and whether brackets are what's attached to the wall or attached to the TV. It was very detailed. I mean, I don't even understand what was what.
Well, let me stop you there for a second. My understanding is that anything affixed to the real estate is part of the real estate. If it's physically affixed, those brackets, I think, would be considered part of the real estate.
So, yeah,
unless they're specifically excluded.
Right, and the standard contract, the standard Erie County contract does exclude the television and the brackets.
In which case, the seller would be responsible for repairing the wall, for example.
Right. But the buyer in this case was making an argument that something the seller was taking wasn't actually a bracket and was something else, and it was they were getting in very very fine detail.
Am I correct in assuming, though, that if it's not spelled out clearly in the document itself, it's not really admissible? Say, for example, if you were to go to court.
Right. Yeah, that's correct.
So the contracting us, when you prepare it, must be pretty clear.
Of course. We have to discuss every little detail with the seller when listing the home of what's included and what's excluded. Mm-hmm. What are they taking with them? I point things out to my homeowners. I'm like, what about that chandelier? Are you planning on taking it, keeping it? Would you be replacing it? What about the bracket? What about this? So we are very specific when we walk through those homes with our homeowners prior to even listing the property.
Say for example, we send in a professional photographer to photograph the house, and something is obviously there in the photograph.
Yeah,
it's not photoshopped. It's not done on a computer to show what the house could look like. This is it. Is that evidence enough, Eric Vallone, if it's not specifically stated in the contract?
No, it's got to be in the contract.
Exclusions or inclusions.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if it's not affixed, it's got to be in the contract. Even if it's in the listing, if the listing says, "Hey, stove and fridge are included," and they're not included in the contract, then they're not included, because once you sign the contract, the listing goes away.
Let's go back to terms here. We've got the appraisal gap. How common in us is the inspection? For a long time, they were just non-existent on a lot of contracts because of the competition you described earlier.
Right.
More buyers than sellers. So buyers want to be competitive, so they remove things Is that still common today?
It is very common, unfortunately. I'm a big believer that one should really understand exactly what they're buying and budget accordingly based on their findings from a home inspection. However, with the competition in the market, a lot of buyers, since it is a contingency that the buyer only can exercise during that time, and it makes it riskier, and that's what maybe people don't understand. It's not because there may be something wrong with the house. It just makes it riskier to the seller if the contract that they accept has a home inspection contingency in it. So it's really important to understand that. But a lot of buyers, what they do is they will waive that contingency in hopes of making their offer more attractive to a seller. And, my advice to that buyer is we try to understand as much as possible prior to making an offer some elements about the home, age of the roof, how many layers it is, potentially mechanical systems.
Once we make a representation like that, unless the seller makes the representation,
Yeah.
aren't we putting our word on the line, our neck on the line, so to speak, so that
Where luckily most properties have the property condition disclosure attached to it, which the seller is disclosing the age of the roof and some additional information about the property.
is that considered part of the contract, Eric?
It's not considered part of the contract, but it is, attached to the contract. It has to be attached to the contract. But I always, tell my clients, as far as those disclosures go, you also have to do your due diligence. Like, the law is still buyer beware. The buyer's responsible for inspecting it. I got a call from an agent this morning, and the listing said newer furnace, and they put the offer in, got it accepted. Found out the furnace was put in 2008. She's like, "Is there anything you can do?"
Is that newer? Newer than
Well,
2000?
It seems newer to me because 2008 seems like it was 5 years ago. But I looked at the calendar and it's
you're
actually
disclosing
not.
your age there. Don't think you want to do that.
I'm going to give the listeners a quick tip. Typically now technology allows us to take a photo of that furnace serial number and the hot water serial number and be able to Google exactly what year, it was at least manufactured, which tells us, hey, if it was installed within 2 years, 3 years of manufacture date, that gives us a rough estimate of that. But I don't try to make any representations on the mechanical systems and roof, but I try to help the buyer understand what to budget for in the next 5 to 10 years, depending on their plan and how long they're staying in the home. And I believe it's important because it really affects what they should pay for a home based on what they are anticipating the home might need.
Interesting. We'll cover this in a minute, but you mentioned caveat emptor, buyer beware.
Sure.
Often you'll get a contract that doesn't have an inspection on it, that might have some weird terms like you mentioned earlier. What do you do when it's your time to approve that contract, which is also part of the contract, the attorney approval process? Would you say to the other attorney, I'm approving this subject to something, or would you say, I don't approve it unless this is in there, or what?
I mean, we try not to have conditional approvals as much as possible because, one, it puts our buyer client at risk for the seller saying, no, we're not going to accept your condition and selling the house to somebody else. But, we do take the time to educate the buyer that, hey, you're getting this property in the condition it's in. If you buy it without a home inspection and you find out later that there's something wrong, you're probably out of luck. I mean, I get a lot of calls for problems after closing, and, most of the time I have to tell people, hey, you could sue the seller. You're probably not going to win. And by the way, it's very expensive. And if it were me, I would put that money, instead of giving it to me or another attorney, put that money into fixing your house. So really that's, we try to make sure the buyer understands that. And if they're not comfortable with it, we can go to the seller and try to get them an inspection. But, we try really hard not to change the deal because it puts that deal at risk for our buyer.
No question about it. Latif, when you're talking to a buyer, do you give them any kind of cautionary advice? For example, in the not so good old days, a rule of thumb was that if you didn't have 20% of the value of the property in cash available, that you're probably going to run into the kind of things Eric's talking about, the problem that you don't know about. I mean, there's 10,000 parts to a house, literally, any one of which could go wrong.
Right.
Do you caution them to say, look, you're buying this with 3% down, you've got an FHA mortgage, and it's all well and good, but things could go wrong. What will you do if things do go wrong?
Yeah. I always say we have to give the buyers and the sellers too, of course, the best advice possible. And at the end of the day, it's their final decision. But I always tell my buyers, I mean, you don't want to be house poor. You want to be able to have extra money, emergency money, things may come up that you didn't anticipate or plan for with the home or with your life. And most buyers understand that. However, sadly, sometimes they do have to stretch that budget to be able to secure a home. And the alternative would be that they continue to pay rent, which is basically 100% interest.
It's 100% expense.
Exactly.
But so it's gone.
Exactly.
You're not building equity except for the landlord who gets to build equity with your money.
Exactly. Anyway, so they're just hoping for the best. They're crossing their fingers and hoping for the best in some cases.
In many cases, that's true. And I think there's an attitude today, certainly among first-time home buyers, just give me a chance to get a house.
Right.
And we have a large pool of frustrated first-time buyers right now, potential first-time home buyers. Last year, the number of first-time home buyers as a percentage of the total was the smallest it's been in years.
Mm-hmm.
It's generally around 30% of all transactions, existing single-family transactions in this country are to first-time home buyers. Last year, it was way down. Do you anticipate that it will get better for first-time home buyers? You mentioned, for example, prices continue to go up. I looked statistically this week, and what we're seeing at our company is an 8% increase in average sale price through 6 months of our fiscal year, 8%, which is way more than what Fannie Mae is talking about. They predicted maybe 3%, and I don't know where they got that number, and 1% for 2026. But if the inventory situation stays where it is, how can that possibly happen?
I do believe that it's in pockets as well.
Yes, or is it localized?
Yes, that's exactly it. I think it's in pockets nationwide. Other parts of the country are seeing different things in terms of supply and demand and inventory, and even prices potentially going down in some other areas versus here in Buffalo. We are thriving as a market. There's high demand. I believe it's our area is still very affordable in comparison to other areas in the country, which is making it more attractive for people to relocate back to Buffalo if they were originally from here, or just relocate to Buffalo in general. We have new job opportunities.
You recognize that gap is narrowing, though. Our values relative to other markets there used to be a huge gap. And that gap isn't as huge anymore. We're going to have to go to break in a second. I cut you off, though, in the middle of the
That's okay. I believe, in general, though, it's more affordable, not just for housing. Mm-hmm. Living expenses, school districts are good, so we have a lot of attractive things in Buffalo.
There's no question about it. When we come back, I want to have you both comment on, okay, look, getting to a closing, we're going to close the deal. What happens then? Because some of the things we're talking about here could be a minefield for both of you in terms of being an attorney and also a professional. Say, if, for example, if they thought something, although it wasn't in the contract, but all of a sudden something came up that they might have asked you about, they thought they asked you about, but maybe they didn't. We'll be right back with more from our Steers after these very important messages.